And now we can go back to the screen share. There. Move that over. So many little buttons to adjust. That works. All right. Okay. Excuse me. Just clearing out the old throat before we get down to work. I think we've given it our normal pause. Make sure YouTube is up and running. It certainly looks like it is. Hopefully, those who are logging in will log in, and they can always go back and check the review if they like. All right, so good. Well, officially afternoon now, as it's 12:01. Thank you all for coming back to study Parashat Bo. We will be picking up in chapter 13 today, and we'll see that chapter 13 has a number of practical pieces of halacha, of things that are operative. Much of the story of the Exodus is, of course, narrative, where we focus on what happened and why. But from the Exodus sequence, from that entire story, numerous implications for practice, Jewish law, halacha, emanate. And we will be looking at one of them in, well, a little detail. Obviously, for every aspect of halacha, there are literally books written about them, but hopefully we can at least see the thread connecting the Exodus to this particular deed. Without further ado, let's jump in then, and we're going to start at the top of chapter 13, verse 1. Adonai, still, must be the changing of the seasons. Adonai spoke to Moshe, saying, Hallow to me every firstborn, breacher of every womb among the children of Israel, of man or of beast, it is mine. So we are here going to be looking at the idea of the Heter Rechem, the thing that is born first to a particular mother, firstbornedness. It follows the mother, so that if a person happened to have two wives, perhaps in succession, although in the ancient world it might have been at the same time, the first of each of them is considered a firstborn of that mother. And that, of course, applied as well to the non-human livestock. Moshe said to the people, Remember this day in mind on which you went out from Egypt, from a house of serfs, for by strength of hand of Adonai brought you out from there. No fermentation is to be eaten. All right. Fermentation here is the translation that Fox is using for chametz, which is useful because the word leavening has a slightly different word that tends to be treated synonymously in practice, which for halakhic reasons is perfectly sensible, because the word fermentation can have other meanings in English, most notably, of course, wine. And obviously we have 4 cups of wine on the Seder night itself, so clearly fermentation in the English definition isn't perfect for the halacha, but it does match the sort of chemical action that's going on here as setting it apart from the unique leavening that is referred to elsewhere. So we've already talked about the special obligation of the firstborn. We are talking about the restriction regarding chametz. Verse 4, Today you are going out in the month of ripe grain. Aviv is the month of spring. We call it Nisan nowadays. The month names were borrowed from the Babylonians after our exile, but there are a couple months that get names in the Torah. One of them here is Aviv, but most of them only get numbers. And it shall be, when Adonai brings you to the land of the Canaanite, of the Hittite, of the Amorite, of the Hivite, of the Jebusite, which he swore to your fathers to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, you are to serve this service in this month. So we are seeing not just the narrative here, but we are seeing the introduction of a particular service, an avodah, as the text calls it, that's going to happen during this month of Aviv. And of course, what is that service? For 7 days, you are to eat matzot. And on the 7th day is a pilgrimage festival to Adonai. So framework of the Seder is being reiterated here, that we have this obligation to eat matzah, specifically to eat only matzah, but not that we have to eat matzah every day. That gets clarified in later passages and halacha. But if you are going to eat bread, it's got to be matzah style. Matzot are to be eaten for the 7 days. Nothing fermented is to be seen with you. No leaven is to be seen with you throughout all of your territory. So here we see, again, the reminder about matzot being the only form of bread that we can have, which was not uncommon in the ancient world. People would eat matzot regularly. They would also eat leavened bread. That is to say, bread that had been leavened with the seor. That is the leavening mentioned here, as opposed to the chametz, which Fox is translating as fermentation. And the seor was similar to what we would call a sourdough starter. It wasn't possible to have the cultured yeast that we have. And so you would need to slowly build up your leavening starter that you would then use to get the leavening process going in new bread every time you made it, which was going to be daily. Bread was something that was made and consumed each day. You did not have an easy source of preservatives for bread to last weeks. You made it and ate it. And you are to tell your child on that day, saying, "It is because of what Adonai did for me when I went out of Egypt." Aha, this may sound a little familiar. This is indeed the section of the Haggadah. After all, the first word is Higadata, right? You are to tell. That is what the word Haggadah means. And you'll notice here that this is one of the answers given to the 4 children as mentioned in the Haggadah. This one, of course, is for the child that doesn't even ask. You initiate. It is because of what Adonai did for me. We've discussed the 4 questions in other classes. I'll let someone else go through the back catalog to find them. Verse 9. It shall be a sign it shall be for you a sign on your hand and a reminder between your eyes, in order that Adonai's instruction be in your mouth, that by a strong hand did Adonai bring you out of Egypt. All right, so here we have the introduction of what we will know better as tefillin. So it is called here an ot. It is a sign or a reminder, and it is going to be on your hand and between your eyes. Now, we're going to unpack this in much more detail in our commentary. So for the moment, I will leave it just as being introduced, that something that we've been talking about is now a sign on your hands and a reminder between your eyes. And when we get to the commentary, the first question we're going to wrestle with is this meant literally, that there is an actual physical sign and reminder between our eyes, or was this meant metaphorically, that is then interpreted into a literal object, and what implications that might have? Keep that in mind, because we'll be discussing that in our commentary. But we continue now on verse 10. You are to keep this law at its appointed time from year day to year day. Yamim, right? Yeah, so that it's going over this entire time. I didn't bring this particular part of the text because we won't have time to read everything, but this is the underlying idea of wearing tefillin daily, that it is not a Passover activity, but that this is a constant activity. And it shall be, when Adonai brings you to the land of the Canaanite, as he swore to you and to your fathers, and gives it to you, you are to transfer every breacher of womb to Adonai. Every breacher, offspring of a beast that belongs to you, the males are for Adonai. So now we are back to this firstborn, specifically the one that opens the womb. Every breacher of a donkey you are to redeem with a lamb, because after all, a donkey cannot be used as a sacrifice. If you do not redeem it, you are to break its neck. Since the donkey is sanctified as a firstborn, but can't go to the altar, if you can't actually use it and take it to the altar, and you don't substitute a lamb for it instead, then anything you do with it would be misappropriation of sacred objects, misappropriation of something that is designated for the altar. So breaking its neck is the only way to avoid transgressing that. Obviously, the best way to avoid any problems is to make the redemption. And indeed, that's what we do for our children as well. And every firstborn of men among your sons, you are to redeem. This is why we have the ritual of Pidyon Haben, the firstborn son of a particular couple, with a number of other extenuating circumstances that can sometimes make it not applicable, such as a C-section, goes through a ceremony called Pidyon Haben. If you're not sure whether this applies to you, feel free to contact me and I'll walk you through the details of whatever your situation is, and we can see whether or not it's applicable. Unfortunately, many people tend to omit this particular ritual, even where it is applicable. And that is something that can be taken care of even by an adult if it should have been done for him when he was a child. But that's not our focus for today, but contact me privately if you'd like more information. It shall be, when your child asks you on the morrow, saying, what does this mazot, right? This is something that most of us are probably familiar with, again, as another question from the four children in the Haggadah. You are to say to him, by strength of hand, Adonai brought us out of Egypt, out of a house of serfs. And it was, when Pharaoh hardened his heart against sending us free, that Adonai killed every firstborn throughout the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of man to the firstborn of beast. Therefore, I myself sacrifice to Adonai every breacher of a womb, the males and every firstborn of my sons I redeem. Now, you'll notice that although this is the language of the four children's question, Mazot, the one who is very young and doesn't know much more than just that as a question, number 3 in the list in the Haggadah, that the answer here, while it is the summary that God took us out of the land of Egypt, goes into an emphasis, a focus on Pidyon Haben, on the redemption of the firstborn, not just on the act of Passover itself, meaning that it could be that a child asked, what is this that we're doing, meaning the Seder, as it is portrayed in the Haggadah, or it could also be, why are we dedicating this firstborn animal? And the answer would be the same. And the extended version, as you can see here, would lead the child to understand that not only the Seder is because of what God has done for us, but so too Pidyon Haben, and foreshadowing, so too many other commandments. As we see here in verse 16, it shall be for a sign on your hand and for headbands between your eyes. For by strength of hand Adonai brought us out of Egypt. So again, we are told this is an ot, a sign, but now rather than a reminder, the zikaron mentioned before, we have totafot. Totafot is the word that many people are more familiar with because it is the word that is used in the Ve'ahavta. The Ve'ahavta, of course, is the paragraph coming after the Shema that is very familiar because it is recited twice daily. And most people learn that in Hebrew school quite distinctly. But whether they translate everything or not, well, that'll depend upon the program you're in and how much you were paying attention at that time in your childhood. So totafot is being used here in Fox's translation as headbands. Sometimes you will hear it translated as frontlet, which is equally not terribly useful for somebody that doesn't know what a frontlet is in regular English. And then, of course, most humorously, it'll be translated as phylactery, because there's nothing so clear in Hebrew that can't be confused by translating it into Greek or Latin, depending upon which word we're working with. Phylactery, of course, is the word meaning an amulet or protective device, which is not what the totafot, which is not what tefillin are meant to be. But we'll use that as our segue then to go look at tefillin themselves and the mitzvah. And before we dive into that, as usual, we'll take a quick pause and see if anybody has any questions. If you're on Zoom, feel free to unmute and just start going. If you're on YouTube, type it in chat and I'll get to it as soon as I see it. All right, no one is leaping up, so let's go ahead and carry on now with our commentary. And we are slightly off center. There we go. So we're going to start off with Rashbam. Rashbam, as I have talked about on numerous other occasions, was the grandson of Rashi. And he tried to do what his grandfather had said he was doing, which is to write a Peshat, a straightforward commentary on the Torah, without indulging too much in midrashim, in extra exegetical work, but instead trying to look at, in context, what each passage might mean. And this is what he has to say about this concept of having this be a sign on your head, or on your arm, excuse me, or a frontlet, a totafot between your eyes. According to the true meaning, an exhortation that this memory should be with you permanently, as if the subject matter had literally been inscribed on your hand. See Song of Songs, place it on your heart as if it had been engraved there like a seal, like a precious jewel which one places on one's forehead as a decoration. So the important thing to note from Rashbam's commentary is that according to his reading, the Peshat, the straightforward, simple understanding of this verse, is that it is intended metaphorically. That when we say this is on your hand, when we say this is between your eyes, the Torah is not asking us to put anything on our hand or between our eyes. It is asking us to make something as though it is as familiar as on your hand, like we would say in the English idiom, I know it like the back of my hand, meaning that it is something that I have perfect understanding and memory of, and a constant awareness of. And that it's between my eyes would mean like I've always got it before me, right? That this is here as my guiding point, my direction in life. And then he brings, of course, the verse from Song of Songs, where it is explicitly stated, not tefillin, but explicitly in that context, talking about the idea of engraving something on your heart like a seal. That this is meant as a simile. This is not meant as a literal direction for action, or a direction for literal action. Now, Rashbam is going to be in the minority, as we will see. The majority of our tradition, of course, treats this as being a literal call to a physical action, which is exemplified in the mitzvah of tefillin, those small boxes that we wear on our foreheads and on our arm, and that we will be going over in more detail the how-to-dos during the worldwide wrap coming up on Super Bowl Sunday Minyan. Now, why would others need to argue with this? I mean, surely Rashbam could be right that this is the simple meaning, but we took it upon ourselves to add a literal manifestation of the metaphor in order to better fulfill the literal request that we remember something. Well, because in Judaism, there is a distinction between those mitzvot that are a very good idea, for example, making a blessing before we eat, and those mitzvot that are a literal command that is explicitly stated to be literally done in the Torah, like making a blessing after we eat. Birkat HaMazon is there explicitly in the Torah. After you've eaten and satisfied, you will bless. Couldn't be clearer. And the blessing before we eat is not explicitly mentioned, but instead is derived through logical deduction, that if we're going to bless when we're satisfied, then all the more so we should bless when we are still hungry. And that is a explicit and understood addition. Not an addition in terms of claiming that it is in the Torah, God forbid, not in terms of rewriting or editing the Torah, God forbid, but in terms of this is something the community should also engage in. And there are numerous things like that that have been enacted by the sages in order that the Torah be preserved and strengthened in our belief. Why couldn't we just say that tefillin is the same? That originally it was meant purely metaphorically, but someone came along and said, you know what, we could actually do this. Let me tell you how. And people went, wow, what a great idea. We should do that too. It's not as though we don't have other mitzvot that are based upon such good ideas. Not only the blessing before we eat, but for example, the netilat yadayim, the hand washing that takes place before we eat bread. That too is a commandment by the rabbis that gets the asher kiddishanu, that gets the commanded blessing format. Likewise, the blessing before we light Shabbat candles or the blessing before the Hanukkah candles. Likewise, those are commandments that were put in place by those authorized by the Torah, hence their legislative authority, and we treat them very seriously. Why not let the tefillin be the same? Well, let's go ahead and read some of the other rebuttals to Rashbam's interpretation of this as a metaphor and see if we can't work out why that would not be quite as ideal. So we're going to continue with Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra can often be very controversial and can often be very deviating from the mainstream, but here we'll see that he's actually going to give a very mainstream explanation for why this should not be taken as just a metaphor. There are those who oppose our holy ancestors, strong words, and say that for a sign and for a memorial, this this oath and this zikaron is to be understood in the manner of, for they shall be a chaplet of grace unto your head and chains about your head, taken from the book of Proverbs, which is, this is parenthetical, not to be taken literally, for it refers to the teachings of one's mother and father. They also say, and you shall write them upon the doorposts of your house is like write them upon the table of your heart, also from Proverbs. Of course, the write them upon the doorposts is the formation of the commandment for a mezuzah, the scroll that we put in a container on the doorpost of our homes. So that's found in the Ve'ahavta as well. And that too could be interpreted metaphorically the same way the book of Proverbs has write them upon the table of your heart, which nobody believes we're actually going to take out a pen and write them on the heart. They furthermore say that it shall be a sign and for a memorial means with a strong hand, as the Lord brought you out of Egypt, shall drop from your lips, meaning that this is just a reminder to speak of the Exodus, as we saw and as the Haggadah seems to also indicate is being taught here, that it is just a reminder to repeat and focus on the story of the Exodus, not to literally tie anything to our bodies. However, says Ibn Ezra, this is incorrect. For at the beginning of the book of Proverbs, it is stated, the Proverbs of Solomon. Thus, whatever Solomon henceforth mentions is by way of parable. So you are reading a book of parables when you read the book of Proverbs. And not every single line is going to say, this is a parable, this is metaphorical, this should not be interpreted literal. That is the caption at the beginning that sets the stage for everything else you're reading. Everything should be taken seriously and should be taken as though truthful, but that doesn't mean it has to be taken as literal action, meaning you don't have to get out a pen and start writing on your actual heart. So, however, it is not, heaven forbid, written in the Torah that it is metaphoric. Ibn Ezra points out that the Torah doesn't say everything in this book should be read metaphorically. So therefore, when the Torah says, put it on your doorposts, we assume that it means literally put it on your doorposts. And when the Torah says, put it on your hand, we assume the Torah means put it on your hand. We can't use its metaphorical excuse that, like we would from Proverbs by comparing verses, because the proverbial verses are, well, proverbially metaphorical, because that's what the entire book claims it is doing. Hence, it is to be taken only at face value in the Torah. We thus will not interpret it except literally. It does not contradict reason if explained according to its plain meaning, like circumcise therefore the foreskin of your heart in Deuteronomy, which has to be interpreted according to the requirements of reason. So Ibn Ezra is not a table-pounding literalist. He is simply saying that unless there is something that is impossible to interpret literally, then we should, when God is giving us a command, interpret it according to the plain meaning of the text, which in his mind should not be interpreted as metaphorical. So we have now two different sides. Rashbam says the plain meaning of the text is, this is metaphorical, remember the Exodus. Ibn Ezra says, no, the Torah doesn't tell us that things are metaphorical unless proved otherwise. The Torah tells us things are as they appear, unless reason comes to tell us that they cannot be. And there is no rational reason that we cannot fulfill these requirements, that we can write them on the doorposts of our house. We can wear them on our hand and wear them between our eyes. So therefore, we have to assume that the plain meaning of the Torah is this, and that we are not interpreting it in a metaphorical way into a physical action. We are actually fulfilling the original mitzvah, and that therefore it has the same status as every other biblically mandated mitzvah. And the only time we deviate from that is when rationally it would be impossible. For example, circumcising the foreskin of your heart. Well, one, circumcising the heart would be suicide because it means open heart surgery, and that's not really a good idea in the biblical times. It's not even a great idea now unless you medically need it. And two, the heart doesn't have a foreskin. So even if you could surgically operate on the heart with no fear, there is no foreskin to be removed, and therefore we are forced to interpret that metaphorically. All right, so Ibn Ezra gives us that as our benchmark. Unless otherwise impossible, we interpret it according to the plain meaning as meaning we should behave plainly in compliance with it. Okay, and again, Rashi, as would not be surprising, reinforces this. The exodus from Egypt shall be to you as a sign. He seems to be hinting towards Rashbam, but you shall write these paragraphs, the verses that are here in the text, and bind them upon the head and upon the arm. Rashi believes that, in fact, we are meant to do these directly, that it is not just a sign, meaning it is not just a mental reminder, but that there is a physical action that goes along with it. And we'll come back to the different paragraphs in just a second. So Rashi is again on team. The Torah really meant for us to do something physical here, and he gives us a little bit more description of what that physical thing looks like. But it's not enough to just say the Torah is asking us to do something physical, because the Torah seems to be going through a great deal of effort, not only to tell us to do something, but to tell us to feel and remember something, or remember and feel something, as often the feeling comes after the calling to mind. And that is something that we don't get for every single mitzvah. While we would love for the Torah to give us more explanation behind every commandment, when the Torah tells us to, for example, take up the lulav and etrog, it doesn't tell us a particular emotion that we are supposed to have, such as the gratitude for redemption from the Egypt, from the house of bondage. It tells us more that it's connected to that, but not much more than that. And so Tur HaAruch is trying to remind us that this physical act comes with a spiritual, emotional component, that these are not something that can be separated, as our earlier commentary seems to suggest. The reason such a parchment with these passages is also to be placed on your arm is to symbolize the chozek yad, the strong hand that God employed in order to orchestrate your redemption from Egypt. It is a reminder of all the miracles. So by having the tefillin on the arm, we are not just doing the put it on your arm part of the Torah. We are reminding ourselves of God's strong arm, specifically in the Exodus, specifically the miracles that occurred. So when we are tying the tefillin on our arm, this should be going through our mind, that we are reconnecting our sense of wonder and our sense of gratitude towards the exodus of Egypt 3,000 years ago, that we are not just, in quotes, wearing tefillin because it was mentioned as just a good idea, that there are mindful reflections that can take place upon each act of the tefillin themselves. Indeed, as Rabbeinu Bachya explains, in verse 14, from what we just read, the Torah writes, God has taken us out of Egypt. This is to teach us that the redemption of the fathers, our ancestors, was the redemption of the sons, everybody who's descended up till now, the next and subsequent generations. This is precisely what we say annually in the Haggadah. God did not only redeem our ancestors, but he redeemed us, this very generation, also at the same time together with them. So taking that theme of the Haggadah, we realize that the tefillin are not there just so that we can check the box of having done a commandment, but that by wearing tefillin, we are recognizing that we have been liberated from Egypt. We specifically, not we, our ancestors, but we, this generation, me right now at services or davening on my own, I was freed from Pharaoh because of what took place in Egypt. So this makes it a true reminder, a true symbol. And that's the part that I have found that for many people gets lost in the wearing of tefillin. For many people, yes, it's a very powerful cultural touchstone of reminding them of their connection to others in the Jewish people who have done this for so long. For some, it is a very powerful family touchstone. They remember when their parents taught them how to wear tefillin, and by wearing tefillin, they feel close to them. But originally, in the Torah itself, these were called not just deeds to be done, but meant to be symbols and reminders. And this is the underlying idea, say these commentaries, that we should be reminded of. It's fine to have the additional remembrances of family and community and everything else that we might also attach to the tefillin, but in its essence, this is a symbol of our freedom. This is a symbol of our liberation. This is a symbol of strength. These are the themes that were originally attached to the tefillin themselves. And Ramban, the great Nachmanides, summarizes another aspect that is meant to come out of these verses and the wearing of tefillin. The meaning is that you are to inscribe the exodus from Egypt upon your hand and between your eyes, and remember it always, in order that God's law be in your mouth to observe his commandments and teachings. That this is not just about remembering the past. This is not just about being grateful for our freedom and our ability to live as we do now, rather than servants of Pharaoh. This is also about where do we go from here with this in mind? How do we live because of that information? And the tefillin act as this wonderful bridge between the past and the future, taking us from the past, remembering what we were able to experience and benefit from, and then say, and this thus binds us or obligates us to behave a certain way, to act a certain way, to make sure that we are focused on living a life according to Torah in a way that the tefillin are meant to guide us. So the whole aspect here comes down very strongly on the side that this is not meant purely as a physical act, and this is not meant purely as a metaphorical statement, but that this is a physical act with a metaphorical understanding built into it. And as such, in many ways, we can harmonize all of these different commentaries and not look at them as being in opposition. Rashbam still a little bit on the outside, trying to call this more metaphorical in the plain meaning, but certainly all of them would agree we do them. And while doing them, this is what is transpiring within us on a spiritual level. Okay, now we're going to get into some details of the tefillin themselves, and that can show us new insights. But I'm just going to pause for a sip of tea and wait for more questions. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. We'll be looking at Mishneh Torah for a while. Mishneh Torah, of course, was written by Rambam, also known as Maimonides, not the same guy that we just read, Ramban. And yeah, you got to get that M and N clear. And Mishneh Torah is his great magnum opus of Jewish law. It is the first systematic, organized, logically constructed delineation of Jewish law in a manner that would be more recognizable to modern readers. It's 1,000 years old, but the organization and structure is very different than prior books, and as such is incredibly useful when trying to learn the basic outline of Jewish practice on, well, just about anything that's not newer than 1,000 years. So let's go ahead and see what he has to say about tefillin. Obviously, there are multiple chapters, and these are just a couple of the paragraphs. Highly recommend that you go through and read the rest of it, and always happy to meet or talk with people about any of the other details at another time. In what manner are tefillin written? Well, there are 4 passages, Exodus 13, 1-10, and Exodus 13, 11-16, which we have looked at. Deuteronomy 6, 4-8, which is also known as the Shema and the Ve'ahavta, and Deuteronomy 11, 13-21, which is the paragraph that comes right after the Shema and Ve'ahavta in a standard Siddur, which also mentions the wearing of tefillin. These are written on 4 parchments. Now, Menachot in the Talmud explains that the word totafot is a combination of the Carthaginian and African terms for 2. So we know that they end up on 4 parchments, says the Talmud, because the tot would be from the Carthaginian word meaning 2, and the tot is from an African word meaning 2, and therefore 2 plus 2 equals 4. So therefore, 4 different passages, 4 separate parchments. We'll see that the tefillin that goes on the arm is written on a single parchment, and we'll talk about that in a second. They are placed in 4 compartments, rolled close, each in a separate entity, which is why if you look inside a tefillin shel rosh, the head tefillin, you'll see there are 4 little compartments for each scroll. They are placed in 4 compartments, which are covered by a single piece of leather. The 4 passages of the arm are written on 4 columns on a single parchment. They should be rolled close like a Torah scroll from the end to the beginning, meaning one continuous roll, and placed in a single compartment. Menachot derives this concept from, and they shall be a sign for you on your hand, the ot. The verse implies that just as the tefillin's external appearance is as a single sign, so too internally they should be a single entity. Since it's being used the singular form of the word, ot, just one, therefore it is meant to be singular, whereas the word ot is not used for the head, that is the totafot word. So 4 on the head, 1 on the arm, but the same text in each. A person should touch his tefillin from time to time during the entire time he is wearing them, so that he will not divert his attention from them even for a single moment, for their holiness surpasses that of tzitz. All right, so let me remind everybody what the tzitz is. The tzitz was a metal plate that was worn on the head by the Kohen Gadol, the high priest during the time of the Mishkan and the temple. Had very special clothing that was worn, and one of the things that was part of the ensemble was a metal plate called the tzitz that had the phrase, holy to God. Well, tzitz has God's name, the Yud-He Vav-He, Adonai, written upon it only once, while the head tefillin, and similarly the arm tefillin, contain the name 21 times. So if this is special because it has God's name on it once, then the tefillin, the head and the arm, each have God's name in it 21 times. Therefore, it is of even greater sanctity. Now, because of that great sanctity and because of the commandment, Rambam is reminding us that we need to be mindful of it. After all, a symbol or a reminder doesn't work if we ignore them. If you put a Post-it note up reminding you to call Mr. Smith and talk to him about some topic, and you never look at that note again, well, it's not a very effective reminder, and you're not going to be calling Mr. Smith anytime soon. So instead, with the tefillin, we need to touch them from time to time. It also means that we can adjust them, we can make sure they're still in the right place, and make sure that we're still wearing them properly. And God forbid that we not become so inured to wearing them that we forget ourselves. Because as we'll see, while wearing tefillin, we are meant to have a different state of mind. So let's go ahead and continue into that theme. Excuse me. The holiness associated with tefillin is very great. As long as a person is wearing tefillin on his head and arm, he will be humble and God-fearing and will not be drawn to frivolous behavior or empty speech. He will not turn his thoughts to evil matters, but rather will direct his heart to words of truth and justice. The tefillin are there, again, not just as a reminder of the past, but because of the feeling we have while we are wearing them, we will be a better version of ourselves. We will be more on guard against the various shortcomings that we are prone to, and we will make sure that we are walking a straighter path. And this is the great power of tefillin. Now, in the ancient world, it used to be common for people of suitable concentration and situational opportunity to wear tefillin for hours at a time, perhaps even the whole day. Nowadays, it is generally not considered feasible because most of us have difficulty keeping our concentration going that long. And yes, that is something that even 500 years ago was a concern. It's not only modern social media that has made people have short attention spans. We have felt that we have been lacking attention span for a very long time. And as such, since tefillin requires a great deal of seriousness, as well as it inspiring a great deal of goodness, we have to sometimes err on not wearing tefillin, lest we do something while we are wearing tefillin because we have forgotten that we are wearing tefillin, and, well, our attention has wandered. So that is why we wear tefillin at this point, primarily just during our prayer in the morning. You can also wear it in the afternoon. That's a whole nother conversation, but let's talk just about the morning prayers in particular. Our sages declared, whoever recites the Shema without tefillin is considered as if he is giving false testimony. Right, this is an idiomatic phrase about false testimony that is used in rabbinic literature to mean that if you are saying the Shema, which mentions specifically tefillin, and you don't wear tefillin, well, then you're basically saying a lie? Are you being truthful? Did God really command you to wear tefillin? If so, why aren't you wearing them? So if you're not wearing them, then perhaps you believe God didn't command you to wear them. And so wearing tefillin during the Shema, which means the morning service, because for various other reasons we don't wear them at night, which is the other time we recite the Shema officially. When we wear tefillin during the Shema, we are being more honest. We are avoiding that cognitive dissonance. We are avoiding that potential hypocrisy of saying God commanded without actually showing up for the commandment. And to just make things even more acute, whoever does not wear tefillin transgresses 8 positive commandments. For in each of the 4 passages contained in the tefillin, we are commanded to wear both head and arm tefillin. So 2 different commandments, head and arm. And sometimes, yes, we are in a position where we can only do the head or only do the arm, and that's should still be done. We don't, they're not a perfect match set. So God forbid somebody not have arms, they would still wear the head tefillin and be able to do that commandment. So 2 separate commandments mentioned 4 times. 2 times 4 is 8. So if you choose not to wear tefillin, every time that you should be wearing them, you are in fact violating 8 commandments. Whoever wears tefillin regularly will live long. As Isaiah says, God is upon them, they shall live. That because of this powerful symbol, this powerful reminder, it is like having God strapped more closely to us than at any other time. And that comes in Isaiah with this reinforcement of life, which of course is the greatest gift that we possess. So yeah, tefillin are a big deal, and we will go into this in more detail and the precise ways to do it when we get together on Super Bowl Sunday for the Worldwide Wrap. But I just wanted to finish up with Sefer HaChinuch that tries to, in my mind, bring together really very basic, very important, but not talked about enough perspective on the commandments. There is a reason for the commandments of the Torah that benefits people's traits to make them more proper and accustom them to better all of their actions through them. So this is a simple idea that people often forget in their eagerness to either pursue the commandments or in their apathy, in their lack of pursuit of the commandments. People often forget that the commandments were created and were given to us for us, that they are there to help us be better, that our own life will benefit through their performance, and that there are reasons intertwined, bound into it, if you'll pardon the pun, into each commandment, that their performance will benefit us. After all, that there is no benefit in their performance, God forbid, to the Creator, blessed be He. When I wear tefillin, I'm not helping God. When I recite the Shema, I'm not helping God in any meaningful sense of helping. Am I helping to spread God's word? Am I helping to reinforce what God wants in the world? Of course, of course, of course. But that's not making God better off, right? When someone's sick and I give them chicken soup, I'm helping them to get better. God is perfect, and God does not need us to improve God. But we need the commandments to improve us. We need the commandments to make us better than we currently are. And that's not to say that we are terrible, but we are still all in need of improvement. And the commandments are the most reliable, the most accessible, and the most powerful way of making that happen, if we actually think about them, if we actually are mindful of them, if we actually reflect upon them. And yes, it's fine and good to do them even without that. And, I've been guilty myself of sometimes needing to rush through a prayer service or other mitzvah without as much due consideration for reflecting upon it as I should. I still receive benefit, not just for its performance, but by the way its performance changes me and the way it changed my life to make sure that I was making time to do it. But the ideal for my benefit is to actually pause, reflect, and try to absorb some of that meaning, some of that reason, so that I end up better off to a much higher degree through their performance. As Sefer HaChinuch continues to say, oops, I realize I misspelled chinuch, that should be C-H-U-N-I-C-H. And if, however, there are from the commandments that we did not fully grasp their explanation due to the smallness of our intellect, because of their great depth and ultimate greatness, right? Yeah, sometimes there are going to be aspects of a commandment that individually or collectively we haven't been able to grasp, either because, well, we are intellectually quite impoverished compared to God, and also because the commandments are incredibly deep and subtle in much of their meaning, and not everyone or even all of us will be able to tease out all of those details. Nonetheless, we should not prevent ourselves from saying about them all that we have grasped to find the benefit that there is for man in his doing them. We shouldn't believe that I can tell you, this is why we wear tefillin, done. But I can say, these are some of the reasons why God gave us the commandment of tefillin. This directs our hearts to truth and justice, as Rambam says. This reminds us of the great sense of gratitude we should have for being liberated from Egypt, each of us individually, constantly, daily, not only during Pesach. That the wearing of tefillin is an incredibly motivating and moving thing to do. We can say what we can say, and we can also say that we don't know everything, and that continued study, continued reflection, and continued observance may, individually and collectively, help us see additional benefits that come from the observance of this and all the other commandments as well. So tefillin is something that I know is still very unfamiliar to many, many people. If you only go to services on Shabbat or holidays, then you may never have even seen tefillin be worn. And if you've come on a weekday service, such as our Sunday morning minyan, 9 o'clock, you may have not availed yourself of tefillin because you don't own them or you don't know how. That's why we do the worldwide wrap, and that's why also I make myself available to anybody who would like to learn more about this mitzvah to come in, and I can help get you started on how this mitzvah can be performed and to reflect on what it can mean for you. So hopefully, each and every person, whether you've been wearing tefillin for years or whether you've never worn it yet, will, one, join us for Worldwide Wrap on Super Bowl Sunday, and two, will look into this and every other commandment more passionately to try and see what is it that God is trying to do to benefit my life through telling me to observe this commandment. Any questions or comments before we finish off? All right. Thank you all so much for getting together and studying with me. I look forward to it every week and look forward to seeing you all next week as well. Take care, everyone, and be well.
Thank you, Rabbi.